Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting overlooking the Russian River Valley of Healdsburg, sitting at Gary Farrell Winery with Director of Winemaker Theresa Heredia. And Theresa, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and tell us a little bit about Gary Farrell Wines.
Thank you, Allison, for having me. Gary Farrell Winery is a name to be reckoned with. So, Gary Farrell Winery is a pioneer of the Russian River Valley. The name is definitely synonymous with the Russian River Valley. In fact, the AVA was established in 1983. Gary Farrell, the man's first wine under this label, was from 1982, and it was a Rocchioli Allen Pinot Noir. So Gary founded this brand and was working with the Rocchioli family and was making wines at Davis Bynum back in the early days and was one of the early pioneers. So when you think about the Russian River Valley, you think about Rocchioli, Bacigalupi, William Selliam, Gary Farrell. Those are the names that come to mind, Davis Bynum. Wow. So it's a big deal, and it was an honor for me to become winemaker here.
Wonderful. So tell me a little bit. You're located here in Healdsburg in the Russian River Valley. Tell me about, do you own vineyards? Are you sourcing fruit, a combination? And if you're sourcing fruit, where are you getting it from?
So we are 100% sourced fruit. So we don't own any vineyards at this time, but we are always on the hunt for a new vineyard. So we purchase fruit from about 35 to 40 different vineyards in any given year. And we make many, many different vineyard-designated Pinots, vineyard-designated Chardonnays. We make a Zinfandel, a Sauvignon Blanc. And our search for vineyards every year is like hunting for cool coastal climate Pinot and Chardonnay. So Russian River Valley is the home base. Mm-hmm. We've got our core of vineyards here, but we're always looking in the West Sonoma Coast, that new AVA out there. We're looking in Mendocino County, looking in Annapolis, looking for interesting, cool climate Pinot Noir and Chardonnay.
And if I'm not mistaken, you've also dabbled down in San Ynez Valley.
Oh, we did, definitely. Actually, and Santa Maria Valley as well. So we made a Bien Nacido Pinot Noir Gary purchased grapes from Bien Nacido, I believe, maybe as far back as 1996. That's the oldest label I've seen. And we stopped producing it in the 2020 vintage. That was the last year that we purchased it. And in 2017, we started purchasing fruit from Santa Rita Hills, from Sanford and Benedict, and also the Chardonnay from La Rinconada. It's the same property, just different vineyard names.
Right.
So I love it.
Wow. So what's your total case production?
We make anywhere from 25 to 27,000 cases on average.
And markets that your wines are available in?
We're available all over the United States, predominantly in, the premier markets, big cities, big metropolitan areas, but you can find us in smaller areas as well. We have 4 different wines that are available in distribution. So we have our Russian River Selection Chardonnay, Russian River Selection Pinot Noir, and 2 really limited vineyard designated wines, our Olivet Lane Chardonnay and our Hallberg Pinot. They're all available in distribution. Mm-hmm. So those can be found, mostly the Russian River Selections, but the vineyard designates you can find at restaurants.
And otherwise, you've got to come here to the winery.
Absolutely. And this is where you get the special gems.
Got it. So for you, I know you grew up in Walnut Creek in the Bay Area, but what is your first memory relevant to wine?
I grew up in Pittsburgh, California. I was born in Walnut Creek. But that's all in the East Bay. The deep East Bay is what we call it, because East Bay would be Oakland. But my what they call the aha moment with wine really was when I was in Burgundy. So my ex and I, who both went to Davis together, we studied chemistry together, but we both became interested in wine at the same time. And we went, when we were still in chemistry, not involved in wine at all, we traveled to Burgundy, Bordeaux, and the Rhone Valley. And while we were in Burgundy, we went to a restaurant called Ma Cuisine in the town of Beaune, and we ordered a bottle of 1995 Denis Mortier Claude Vougeot. And that was just like a wow moment. It was an amazing wine, and Denis Mortier was still alive, so he had made that wine, and it was a spectacular, life-changing moment in time for me.
But at that point, you already knew you wanted to be a winemaker, right?
No, I did not. I had only been enamored with wine at the time.
And so that's the aha moment, and sort of a catalyst to wanting to make wine?
Absolutely a catalyst. So he and I were both in the chemistry program, working on our PhDs. We were studying chemistry to possibly become either researchers, that's what he wanted to do, or I wanted to become a professor to teach chemistry. But UC Davis, as everybody knows, is a big famous wine viticulture and enology program. So we met some viticulture and enology students, and when they started talking about their research projects and we started talking about ours, I realized they were doing the same kind of science that we were doing, that I was doing, but their product was wine and mine was peptides. I was doing peptide synthesis for cancer therapeutics research.
But that's good work. That's good work.
Great work. However,
it's not
like
wine.
Ground zero, it's not wine. But I was the first student working on that project, and I don't think I was ever going to see the results of that research in my lifetime. Wine, on the other hand, you see it, less than a year later, you see the real results, and you see it in bottle. Well, we see it in bottle 10 to 15 months later.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, you grew up in the East Bay, so you're not far from wine country. You said your aha moment was traveling. Obviously, wine was not part of your mindset of a career at that point. Was that one of your first introductions to wine as well, or were you introduced to wine at an earlier age? Is there a memory of when you first realized wine was wine, even as a child?
Oh, yeah. We had a box of wine in the refrigerator when I was growing up. I remember in, college, maybe it was my junior year, we went with a bunch of friends to Lake Havasu, and we brought Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. And my roommate and I got stranded on our little floaty rafts that have the little, beer holders. It was a monsoon came in and it blew us all the way out into almost the middle of the lake, and the Coast Guard had to come and rescue us. And each of us had our full bottle of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill in the little cup holder.
I, too, was a fan of the Strawberry Hill.
But, in terms of a little bit more serious wine, I laugh at this too. Like, one of my favorite wines was Bogle Petit Syrah. When I first started drinking wine, like actually drinking wine. But then it quickly, was just an upward slope in terms of like wine education and loving wines. And Pinot Noir was always my absolute favorite. And my first harvest was at Sainsbury. And I loved their Pinots and Chardonnays.
So you're a Pinot girl. You make Pinot and Chard girl, I should say, because you make a lot of those. If we were to come into your home, what sort of wines would we find in your cellar or, in your refrigerator or your collection?
You'd find a lot of Gary Farrell. But in addition to that, you'd find champagne, or sparkling wine in general, but champagne, Chateauneuf du Pape. So in fact, if I'm in the mood for red wine, if I'm not drinking Pinot Noir, I'm drinking Chateauneuf du Pape or Grenache or maybe a Northern Rhone Valley Syrah, something like that. Otherwise, I'm drinking a lot of white wine at home. My wife and I love white wines.
Yeah, well, at Chardonnay or other whites?
All whites.
All whites.
We drink a lot of Chardonnay because, again, I have a lot of Gary Farrell at home. I have a glass of Richie Chardonnay in my glass right now, as I poured for you as well. And it's one of my favorites.
So is there a wine you opened recently, not the Richie Chardonnay we're drinking right now, something else that you opened this week from your cellar that drank really well?
Last weekend, right now we did dry January, so we're not drinking during the week because we're trying to be more healthy. But last weekend with some friends out in Pacifica, I opened a 2019 Lancel Creek Vineyard Pinot Noir. And it was like it was just alive and vibrant and singing to us, and they helped me kind of come up with some tasting notes for it.
So do you think, you're working a lot with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Obviously, your love is sort of in that, and I combine those two grapes. We know they're both the grapes of Burgundy. They seem to be a pair. But do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, I don't think there's a perfect varietal, but I'm always wowed at how robust Chardonnay is. You would think that red grapes would be more robust, and the thicker skinned varietals are more robust, but Chardonnay is a survivor. I think grapevines are survivors and they're going to outlast us, as humans, but Chardonnay can withstand heat waves and, really cold temperatures and botrytis. It can handle 5-10% botrytis out in the vineyard, and it just really survives and gives us really great quality flavors.
So, this is just the question. This is the question everyone always hates because they think it's too loaded. But I'm curious your opinion on wine critics and scores. You make a lot of wine. Your wines are in the general market. Obviously, you want to get recognized. People know Gary Farrell, as you said. It is an iconic Sonoma brand. But how do wine critics and scores play a role in that, and do they help or hurt, in your opinion?
I think that scores help. I have respect for the scores. I don't make wine for the scores. I don't make wine for the critics. We make wines from the heart, wines that are meant to pair with food and wines that are really representative of the origin of the place. But I respect the scores because I remember my early days when I, couldn't afford to buy, cases and cases of wines to evaluate. What did I do? I used to cut out the Wine Spectator guide, and so I used those as my guide to purchasing wines. Love the Wine Enthusiast. Love all the different magazines and reviewers. I think they're great. Love Pinophile. Wine Enthusiast likes our wines a lot and, gives them some really nice scores.
So, other people may use scores. You used to. Now, as a wine drinker who's so knowledgeable, in and on your own, quick answer, red, white, or rosé?
Rosé.
Oh! Still or sparkling?
Sparkling.
And I'm going to say you're an equal opportunist on sparkling, or is it champagne?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm equal, but champagne all day, every day.
Do you make sparkling wine?
No, we do not.
Have you ever thought about doing it?
Absolutely. In fact, one year we made a base wine. We just had some extra grapes and just kind of, pardon my French, for shits and giggles, we decided to make a base wine. And so we picked at a low bricks, low sugar, low maturity. And we made a really delicious base wine, but decided not to make a sparkling wine out of it. And we blended it into I want to say it was our 2017 Russian River Selection Chardonnay.
So you're making, with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir being your two primary grapes, we know that these are really some of the most food-friendly wine styles to work with. Pinot and Chard are sort of your go-to it when in doubt, right? So I'm curious how you approach food and wine pairing. Do you think that there are rules? Do you follow any rules? Are there any basic guidelines you suggest? Or do you just open up a bottle of Pinot Noir and that's that?
I open up a bottle of either Pinot or Chardonnay and that's that. I don't necessarily believe in rules, but I do believe that it's more about the acid and the overall body of the wine. Let me use an example. You can have some really rich, big, ripe, buttery wines, Chardonnays, that you could pair with bigger, rich foods, meat dishes. You could also have a really, acid-forward, juicy, kind of spicy Pinot Noir that you can pair with all different kinds of seafood and Asian foods, really spicy Chinese food. So I don't think the rules apply to those kinds of foods. I think that those rules apply to the kind of more Eurocentric food and wine pairing guidelines. Think about different cultural food and wine pairings, and you could probably take reds and whites and pair them with all different kinds of foods.
So have a little fun, but look for acid, look for texture, and see what happens.
Yes, and the spices are important. Spices in the food and the acid in the wine, the phenolic structure, the overall tannic structure. Something that's really big and jammy, big tannins, big jammy, like a Cabernet Napa Cab, you want to pair that with meats. That rule is obvious. But when it comes to lighter bodied wines, you can really just kind of get creative.
So you're making how many different Pinot Noirs?
We make about 14 different vineyard designated Pinots, and also a Russian River Selection Pinot.
And probably about the same with Chardonnays?
About 8 different Chardonnays, vineyard designated, and a Russian River Selection Chardonnay.
Okay, so if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Oh my goodness.
Which child is your favorite today? No.
For the welcome wine, right? You said welcome.
To welcome them, yes. To say to someone, welcome to Gary Farrell, this is our winery.
I'm going to welcome them with our rosé. Our rosé of Pinot Noir is amazingly delicious. I just wrote a tasting note for it, so I know that.
So it's fresh in your head?
Yep, exactly. And it's kind of like, it's the they of the wines. It's not a he or a she. It's not a, Pinot. It's not a red or a white. It's somewhere in between.
I like
it's
that.
It's a they.
I like that. I like that. For somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, whether it's the rosé or one of the many Chardonnays or Pinot Noirs, what do you think that they're missing out on?
For people who haven't tasted Pinots or Chardonnays?
No, Gary Farrell wines.
I think they're missing out on a lot of nuanced, really tremendously character-driven wines that are super site-specific. And if you want to taste big and ripe and jammy, in-your-face wines, you don't need to taste the Gary Farrell wines. If you want to taste things that are elegant and site-specific, come here. Food-friendly wines.
Well, I mean, sipping on this Richie Chardonnay, beautiful elegance. It's got richness, but also this great acidity that's just It's keeping my lips wet while I talk to you here.
It's mouth-wateringly delicious.
Good. So good. So good. So we're, kind of in the middle of a crazy season here in California, getting more rain than we've ever seen in probably the last decade or more, which is not the norm. But typically we have pretty consistent vintages. And I'm curious, in your experience, do you see more variation from year to year or more consistency?
I think that it's pretty consistent from year to year. There's definitely vintage variation in terms of wine quality, fruit quality, tannins in the skins, jamminess of the fruit, acid in the fruit when we pick it. But, in terms of the onstart of harvest and the finish of harvest, I think it's pretty consistent from year to year, even when you take weather into consideration. So this year's going to be later. The weather's been so cold. We were out in the vineyards about a month ago, 3 to 4 weeks ago. I want to say a month, with our staff, kind of showing them some of our vineyards. And we were at the Allen Vineyard, and we saw some early signs of bud break. The buds were starting to swell. They still haven't, we haven't seen official bud break out there yet. So they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but the weather's been so cold. So things are going to be later. But I think it's still going to be fairly consistent.
And are there any sort of signs or predictors that you look for that are going to help you determine what kind of harvest you might have or what kind of vintage you're going to have?
Yes, but it's early right now. Bud break, it's kind of the first indication of when things are going to happen, and already we know it's going to be later. But summer could push things really, really hard. So that means that bloom could happen later. It could be sunny from here all the way through the end of May, and we could see bloom happen around average times. But then if it's really warm and sunny from that point on until, all through the summer, that could make harvest closer to average.
And so how many years have you been here at Gary Farrell?
May 1st will be 11 years.
11 years. So in the years that you've been here at this winery, have you established any sort of rituals, good luck rituals, that you and your team do or you individually do at the start of harvest or during harvest?
We have a sparkling wine toast, which I like to make a champagne toast. So on the first day of harvest, we open a bottle of champagne or sparkling wine, and we have a toast. It's in the morning, so we can't really enjoy it too much, but we have a few sips, and then we just toast to the harvest and ring it in. That's the tradition. It's something I've always done, not even just at Gary Farrell. And they did it before me.
Just something to mark. Here we go.
Yes. It's honoring the season and the onstart of harvest.
So speaking of harvest and spending time in the vineyards, you're working with, you said 40 some odd different vineyards?
35 to 40. 35 to 40.
So obviously every vineyard has its own personality, different soils, different elevations, different slopes, different regions for that matter. So I'm curious how intimately involved you are with your vineyards. When you're walking through, they say some people talk to their wine, and I'm wondering, do you have conversations with your grapes? And if so, do you have different conversations depending on where you are?
Yes, actually, sometimes I do. Last year I did, and I'll tell you why. So last year, it depends on exactly what's happening in the season, but last year was a pretty condensed harvest season. We finished on September 9th, which was the earliest finish to harvest ever. So when I was out walking the vineyards, just before the severe heat wave, and also during the severe heat wave, I was walking around talking to the vines at Rocchioli, because we also lost Joe Rocchioli on August 22nd. He passed away. He was a legend, right? And so he passed away August 22nd. The heat wave came on or around September 6th, and between that time, those grapes at Rocchioli kind of stopped ripening. They just kind of halted, maturity halted. And that was even before the severe heat wave came. Sometimes a severe heat wave can put a halt to grape maturity, but it happened before that. And so I was talking to them, and kind of talking them through their grief if they're suffering it, and so yes. But that was very specific circumstances.
So they needed a little grief counseling. They came out of it and they were able to ripen fully.
And we literally just tasted our Rocchioli Pinot today from 2022, and it is spectacular. We're going to make a little small batch under a black label with under our Inspiration series, honoring our 40th anniversary, 82 to 2022, and honoring Joe Rochioli since we lost him last year.
Oh. Well, see, talking to your wine helps.
Yeah.
Or your grapes.
They finished ripening at that point.
So you were saying that wine was not something, making wine wasn't something that you thought you would do, and you wanted to be, you were studying chemistry and a chemist. When you were a little girl, is that what you knew you wanted to be when you grew up, or was there something else you thought you wanted to do?
I never knew that I was going to get into science. I never even fathomed wine, ever. Not in my whole entire life until just around the time we stumbled upon it. But I was always interested in science. So I remember as a kid not having, like, we had run out of mayonnaise in the cupboard. I don't know why this sticks in my head. But I was trying to figure out what items we had in the cupboard that I could use to make mayonnaise. We didn't have Google at the time. I couldn't look it up. I couldn't look up in the encyclopedia what's a recipe for mayonnaise. So I just started picking out things from the cupboard, and I put it in a blender or something to try and whip it up. It definitely didn't turn out like your usual mayonnaise, but I tried to make something like it. I'm not a cook. So that was all chemistry. And then the first real science class that I took in junior high was like an awakening moment. I knew that I loved science. And then in high school, when I took chemistry my sophomore year, it came to me pretty easily. And so I knew that I wanted to get into science.
Wow. So when you're not working, how do you like to spend your free time?
I listen to a lot of music. I'm super geeky about audio equipment. We left the winery the other day. We had to leave here because the rainstorms were flooding the roads around us, and we were worried we weren't going to be able to get out of the winery. So we all, just kind of vacated the premises. And I went home and I worked for a few hours, and then late in the afternoon, I went to go see some old friends of mine who just opened up an audio store in Santa Rosa. So pretty cool stuff. So I went to go hang out with them at the audio store, and we watched the rain fall, and it was pretty cool.
So what do you do in your free time? I hang out at audio stores.
I would love to. I don't do it often enough. And if I did that, I would spend all my money.
So do you have a favorite singer or band?
If I had to name one favorite singer, it would probably be Ella Fitzgerald. I have more records from Ella Fitzgerald than I do of any other artist.
And if you were going to pair a wine with Ella Fitzgerald, what would it be?
Ooh. Does it matter what vintage? What producer? Wow. I would actually probably pair her with that 1995 Denis Mortier Clos de Vougeot. I think that would be both are kind of aha moments for me, her voice and that Pinot.
So when you're, I know that you said that you and your wife, does she work in wine?
No, she's a marriage and family therapist.
Okay. So, but she drinks wine, right?
I provide therapy for her, yes.
It works both ways.
Wine therapy.
So when you're planning a romantic evening for the two of you, what sort of wines set that mood, set that tone that this is a romantic evening?
All I have to do is open a bottle of Hallberg Pinot Noir. That's it. No, I'm serious. That's it.
You don't have to start with the little bubbles and move to this.
No. Bubbles make her happy. She loves bubbles. But, if she sees a bottle of Hallberg, it's a good night for her.
So, when you look back at your career or your life, you were saying that you found science and it was sort of an aha moment for you to find science and to develop, these loves that you have in the wine and everything. When you look back, was there a teacher or someone in your life, a parent, a family member that gave you a piece of advice that is something that you carry through with you, whether how you work or how you look at life or how you live your life?
I don't know that I would say advice, but there was definitely a teacher. My high school chemistry teacher, Mr. Jang. In fact, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I did reach out to him. It was after I was well engrossed in the wine industry, and I reached out to him and just told him how his class and his teaching, how he inspired me and changed my life. I would never have gotten into science, period, or wine if I hadn't had that class. Wow. And that was my high school chemistry class. He was a great teacher, and I loved the way he taught it, and it just clicked with me. I think if he had been a bad teacher, I don't think it would have clicked the same way. Huh. So it wasn't advice, it was just his, his teaching style.
And it's an interesting thing to think what road you would have gone down had that not been that moment for you.
Absolutely. I do wonder about that sometimes. It's just my life could have taken a totally different direction. Maybe I would have found science in a different way. But I love that I feel thankful for him. I'm actually doing a tasting on Sunday in my hometown. It's the first ever wine bar. Dalle Vino is the name of the wine bar in Pittsburgh, California. It's where I grew up. And I'm the first winemaker from Pittsburgh, California, who's going to be featured there doing a tasting. Wow. I'm kind of hoping that he and his wife will be there. But anyway.
You should reach out to him and make sure he comes.
I should. Maybe he'll see the ad. It was in the newspaper and everything. We'll see.
Well, obviously, to me, that would be a really proud achievement. And for him, that would be a great thing to see a student and what you've achieved. When you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
I talk about this often. I just told somebody about this yesterday. I often value, and somehow the wines that I've made in the most heartbreak vintages feel the most special to me. And so I have to name a vintage from before my Gary Farrell days, and it was the 2010 vintage. It was at Freestone, Joseph Phelps Freestone Vineyards. And it was the most beautiful vintage. The grapes were ripening beautifully. It was a really cold, cool summer, very foggy. The grapes we're close to the ocean, so the grapes didn't see very much sunshine. And at some point, we and all the vintners around us stripped some leaves because we were starting to see mold and mildew pressure. Sprayed a little bit. It was only a few weeks before harvest, but then we got a heat wave and it was above 100 degrees for 7 days in a row, and those poor little babies fried all on the exposed side. And we developed something that I call now I call it the reverse sort, where normally you put clusters across the table and you sort out, bad clusters and throw them out. Well, we were taking out the good ones to save them, and everything else was going across the table into the dump bin. Wow. So we were fast, really fast, trying to save all the good ones. But they were some of, I think that's another year that I started calling beautiful clusters nuggets of love, because that's what they looked like. They were little beautiful individually hanging clusters with perfectly brown stems. It was slated to be one of the most perfect vintages, and then that happened. Those wines because we sorted them so carefully, we made very little wine, threw away a lot, but they're some of my favorite wines that I've ever made in my career.
Wow. Heartbreak. Well, Pinot Noir is a heartbreak grape.
It is, indeed. You cannot deny it. That didn't happen to Cabernet in the same way, because the thick skins, right, that can survive. Chardonnay survived a lot better than Pinot.
Mm-hmm. So when you finish this sentence for me, a table without wine is like?
A vacuole. Empty space.
Empty space. Well, we're sitting at a big table right now, and there's a lot of empty space at this table. If there was anyone from any walk of life, living or deceased, that you could share a bottle of Gary Farrell wine that you had made, what person would that be?
Ooh, wow. God, somebody I've never met. Michelle Obama. I want to pour her my wine. I want to meet her. I want to drink wine with her and hang out with her. Barack too, but I want to hang out with Michelle.
Which wine would you want to pour for her?
Oh, God. 2019 Lancel Creek Pinot. Because I told you I had that recently. It was really delicious.
So if she's listening.
Come on, Michelle. Come to Gary Farrell.
So you mentioned at the very beginning that you think we'll be drinking wine, or vines will be growing long past us. With that said, with climate change, with everything else, you're pretty confident that wine production and wine drinking will continue 100 years, 200, 300 years from now?
I do. I think so. I think that we'll evolve with the grapes, and we'll adapt and figure out how to adapt to climate change. And hopefully, in the long term, our children and our children's children will be able to make some change, have some impactful changes over the years to, allow the grapes to adapt as well.
Mm-hmm. And if, unfortunately, that was to end and you were sent to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you want to take with you?
Specific producer or style? Does it matter?
If you can go specific producer, if you're bold enough. I know a lot of people like to just kind of gloss by and be like, I'll have champagne, Burgundy, and...
3 wines. Well, okay, being general, I need champagne. Ooh, God, I'm sorry, Pinot. I need champagne, Chardonnay, and Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
Okay.
And... yeah, those are probably going to be my 3 choices. I apologize, Pinot. I can't give specific producers because I love too many. But let's make that Denny Morte one of them.
Okay.
If you can still find it.
get a little specific.
Yeah.
So, we're coming to the end of this, and you've spoken a little bit about music. We've talked about some pairings and stuff like that. And one of the things that, we play at the end of all of our interviews is a little game with wine and music, because, wine conjures up emotions, music conjures emotions, and sometimes, together you get another sensation. So based on some of the wines that you've spoken about and some of the wines that you make, I was wondering if you could pair them with a genre, a musician, a specific song, album, etc. So I want to start with your aha moment wine.
That Denny Morte that we're talking about, what music would I pair with it? Ooh, I love jazz, and I love deep, sultry jazz, like Hank Mobley. And my favorite I have two favorite Hank Mobley albums. One is No Room for Squares, and the other is Workout. So I would probably choose one of the. I'm going to go with Smokin' from Workout. That's the song I'm going to pair with it.
Okay.
Specific.
Okay. The Rocchioli Chardonnay that we are drinking right now, which
This is Richie Chardonnay.
Oh, sorry, Richie. Sorry.
Start with an R.
I'm sick. Richie Chardonnay that we are drinking. And this, what vintage is this?
This is 2019 Richie. And I've paired this song with Chardonnay before, and I'm going to do it again because I think this is also a perfect pairing. But I love Ella Fitzgerald. My favorite song from her, one of my favorite songs is Honeysuckle Rose.
I think that's perfect because the wine has sort of a honeysuckle richness, but also this beautiful acidity that kind of, glosses right over the top.
Absolutely. And it's such a fun song. It's a really upbeat, soulful song, and I think it pairs really well with this Chardonnay.
Okay, what about your, let's see. What's the Pinot Noir I have in my glass here?
That is 2016 Fort Ross.
Okay, so Fort Ross, closer to the sea, nice ocean breezes. It's got a little age on it. What would you pair with this?
Let's see. Thinking about this one, 2016. I think of that I got married right here at Gary Farrell, and that one brings me memories of that. So I'm going with If I Ain't Got You. That's the name of the song. It was our wedding song, actually, and I think that would be a perfect pairing.
I love that. And let's do your Taboni Vineyard Pinot Noir, because I know you do a lot of single vineyard Pinot Noirs. So Taboni Vineyard is Russian River Valley. It's the 2018.
Taboni Pinot. So Taboni is a bigger, bolder, kind of meatier, it's a bigger mood. So I'm going to go with hip hop. And what song am I going to choose? I'm going with Kendrick Lamar. And I think I'm going with Black Panther, the album. And I think I'm going with, what's that song called? King's Redemption? I forget. Love it. It's got really deep bass. Like, it's got a really heavy beat to it, and I think that would be a great pairing.
I love it. I'll pull more wines. I'll do one more because you're good at this. You're the wine that you would give aliens, your rosé, the one that's a they. It's neither white nor red.
Exactly. Yeah. You want a pairing for the aliens? Something I want the aliens.
No, with the rosé.
Rosé, crisp, vibrant, mineral driven. That's a tough one. I'm going to go with Amy Winehouse on that one. She's another one of my favorites. Me and Mrs. Jones. Okay. Yeah.
I like it. I feel like we just need to start playing some music. Go hang out in the audio store.
We should. Yeah, we should. Yeah.
Well, before we head out there, I have one more question for you. It's a two-parter. The first question is, what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to go explore next?
Like Eastern European where orange wines come from. So either, the Friuli region of Italy, Croatia, Georgia. There's a Georgian restaurant. I say little because it actually is a little restaurant. It's in Sebastopol, and they have a whole list of really inexpensive wines from Georgia. And if you for local people around Sonoma County, go explore, talk to the guy who runs the restaurant. He's really tall and skinny and sounds very Georgian, but he'll walk you through the list, and it's not overwhelming at all. It's not overwhelming because he makes it not overwhelming.
Right. So you want to go explore more of that, although you can do it right here in your own backyard a little bit at the restaurant.
I could, but I want to go where the wines are made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for people that want to travel here to Sonoma, how can they visit you? Where can they find you?
www.garyfarrellwinery.com. And we're located here in Healdsburg, but not in Healdsburg proper. It's a little bit of a windy road from the town of Healdsburg to get to Gary Farrell, so we're actually closer to Guerneville. But it's really beautiful. Come here. If you can, schedule it as your last tasting of the day and come and relax out on the terrace and enjoy this gorgeous view. Or come in the morning if you prefer, and you can enjoy a really foggy, river view.
Oh, amazing. Well, yeah, just looking out the window here, all I see is forests and trees, and the sun is shining, a rare thing lately. But no, it's absolutely beautiful. Theresa, thank you so much for joining us today on Wine Soundtrack. I hope you had a little fun answering some questions, and I want to cheers with you.
I did. Cheers. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the fun interview. That was unique. I loved it. I feel like I stumbled a little on that last one, but
you did great.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.